Can I just comment? Isn't there? I've worked in Scrum, two Scrum projects in the past, and I've had very limited experience. But I have almost felt very constrained by people implementing what they feel is a very rigid framework for whatever agile methodology they use. And so this is the process, this is the framework. Along comes an agile coach, and it says, "Hey, you didn't do your retrospectives. Shame on you." And it's kind of, there's no flexibility in give from some organisation, or sorry, people feel that they have to do it, otherwise it's just not agile. We're not doing agile, are we? And it's kind of, well, hold on a minute. You're trying to mold this into in an organization, and there needs to be a kind of a meeting of minds there about how that might work. Or am I being very naive?
No, that is that's where the mindset clashes, from my experience, where you're trying, especially when you're moving from kind of waterfall organization into an agile way of working. The first thing that people tend to do, as David said in the beginning, is you pick your framework and you go with it, and everyone has to do it, which may not be right for each project. But then when people start missing very specific acts of the agile framework that they've chose to go through, like the retrospectives, that is there not because you're going to tick a box. It's because it's fundamental for the continuous improvement, the learning, the development. And that is a whole different issue if the team doesn't want to do those or they're not engaged with them. It may be that, again, they have never done the team charter and they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing.
I think, and also for me, with all the thing around COVID, I wonder how much of that restriction and that framework has been lifted or ignored in the need to actually get something out there. And I wonder if in a retrospective, people will go, do you know what? Why did we always have to do something like this? Because this is what and maybe it's different circumstances, and it's probably not right to kind of use something like that. But I think it's been interesting that some organizations have been able to kind of just suddenly remove those certain restrictions, I would say, of Agile in terms of governance that have allowed them to actually push things through.
Well, some constraints are good, right? Because it forces you to focus, right? And do away with what actually is not that big a deal or not that important, right? And I think in some way, so I've seen teams where with the whole pandemic isolation thing, they were just plodding along sprint by sprint and kind of delivering stuff, but kind of nobody really cared all that much. It was sad to see, really. But then wait, okay, they're cutting budgets and stuff, so we actually have to deliver value now, because otherwise they're gonna they're gonna cut us off. So okay, let's deliver value now, which is like, finally, right? But in a way that constraint actually made them, okay, let's actually forget that feature. I know I was banging on about it for months, but actually, you know what? It doesn't really matter. We really need that one. Otherwise, we're gonna get our head chopped off. So in some way, it forces you to really focus your thing. It's a bit like if you talk about an MVP, right? And you want to minimize the amount of features that you have, and it's really hard to do because people want more, right? That's a natural instinct. But if you put a real constraint on this, then you don't have a choice, right? You have to. It really has to be minimal, right? But my take on this, just briefly, I think it really depends on where you are on your maturity level, right? So if I take Scrum, for example. So if someone is really quite mature with Agile in general, like I feel quite constrained by Scrum, because even though the idea of sprinting just feels a bit too harsh. Like, do I really have to wait, right, the end of the sprint to talk about what we've done and to have a retrospective? I mean, it feels kind of silly. I just want to do it more continuously. But equally, if a team is new to this and they ask for my advice, I'm going to say do Scrum, right? Do sprinting every 2 weeks. But then people will say, well, what did you say 2 weeks? It depends on the context, doesn't it? I was like, well, yes, but for this team, they're new. 2 weeks seems like a good default. I mean, it might not be the optimum time, right? but for now, it's it's probably quite good to start with, right? And there's a reason for sprinting, right? So are you mature enough as a team to do away with the sprinting idea, right? Can you actually be disciplined enough to do it continuously, or do you, or is it just an excuse because you can't be asked, right? You can't be bothered with the meetings and all so it's just cowboy, right, stuff.
Yeah.
And it's an excuse to get rid of stuff because you can't, you just not.
Yeah, I've had exactly that experience. A team, we were using Scrum, using it very effectively. They said, hey, we don't need this anymore. We'll go to Kanban. And they stopped delivering. They just fell off the radar completely. It's very easy to do. I mean, I'm very much of the view that Agile is essentially a mindset. The practices and the specific things that you do sit on top of that, but it's the mindset that makes it work. And this goes back to Toyota. You look at how Toyota works, and it's all in the mindset. Scrum is a really good framework to help people learn some of that mindset. It won't do the whole job, but it really is a good framework to help people learn that mindset. But it's, and again, in my experience, it's maturity is part of it, but there's also a regression there. A team can look really mature, but if the context changes, that same team can regress back, and that tells you that the fundamental mindset wasn't really cemented in place. It was there because the practices were supporting it. Take away the scaffolding of the practices, and it can collapse very easily.
Yeah. And also, I think there are things that you've put in place that made you better, but then you need to let them go to be even better, right? So like when you're learning cycling, you need the stabilizers, right? But at some point you need to get rid of them, right? And if you really want to be a racing champion, right, you're not going to be a racing champion with your little wheels on the side, right? And in a way, I see sprinting that way a bit, right? It's like the scaffolding that I think Jeff you mentioned, I think, where you need that in place, right? But if you take it off, there's a risk that you're just not ready, right? And then you fall back. But at some point, if you need that agility, you need to be able. So it's really hard from the organizational point of view to, when a team says we want to do away with sprinting, if I carry on with that example, is it because they're really that mature? They really should do without, if they would actually be better, or they're gonna just fall flat on their face because they're just being lazy about it or something. It's going to be quite a challenge to distinguish the two. But then, if you have a learning, adaptive organization, you should be able to experiment that way and say, well, let's apply Agile mindset to this, right? Let's run an experiment. Let's try. If it fails, have some measurements and metrics to be able to judge whether that's a successful experiment or not, and then learn from there, right?